What is up, kinfolk? How y'all doing? So this is kind of old. It's like a month old, but I was recently having a conversation with my brother and he talked about a purge law in Illinois. Apparently it's been out for a month, been known about for a month, but they're going to implement it in January of 2023. Now, I live in California, specifically the Bay Area. We've had certain things that I wouldn't say they're necessarily purge laws, but San Francisco is a huge example. Things where if you rob someplace but only a certain amount of merchandise, I think it's under $1,000 is stolen, you won't be prosecuted. There are other things regarding like drugs. We aren't completely in a purge scenario, but you know, it's kind of interesting. So y'all already know what it is. Without further ado, let's get into it.
My comments on this, I can't even begin to tell you how dangerous this act is. First, it was passed in the middle of the night with 40 minutes to read an 800-page bill, which is unacceptable. As of January 1st, 2023, the following things will go into effect, and people need to be aware of this. It abolishes cash bail for almost every offense. This includes, but isn't limited to, kidnapping, armed robbery, second-degree murder, drug-induced homicide, aggravated DUI, threatening a public official, and aggravated fleeing and eluding. Offenders released on electronic monitoring have to be in violation for 48 hours before law enforcement can act.
Hold up. So, cashless bail on stuff such what? And here's the thing, you know, they talk about you shouldn't be a conspiracy theorist, but when I hear about stuff this like, you know, this happened overnight, it was 800 pages long, I'm like, call me crazy, but this does seem a little bit orchestrated and very intentional, because if you really wanted people to know about this, you would have maybe condensed it as well as gave people a heads up notice of what was coming, but it doesn't seem like that was the case. And then even if you were aware, it's like, okay, who's going to take the time to read 800 pages worth of information? Jesus. Wow. Time to move, guys. Time to move.
They could almost drive to Alaska before we can even look for them. It denies victims their constitutional rights. And keep this in mind, businesses and homeowners. Officers will no longer be able to remove trespassers from your residence or your businesses. Someone could decide to live in your shed, and all we can do is give them a ticket. You have to decide what level of force is required to remove them.
So with that, my curiosity is, because I don't know if Illinois in and of itself is a complete gun-free state. I'd have to look into that. But if you were to use force in that regard, what would happen to, for lack of a better term, the good guys in this scenario? I see a lot of instances where people do the right thing, and unfortunately, even though because they did the right thing, they end up getting prosecuted for it. You could have somebody trespass, and you're better off just either, if it's getting to a crazy level, you're better off just pulling the trigger on somebody than relying on the cops. This is why I also say that guns are important, especially in places like this. The people who turn in their guns are not going to be the people who are committing these crimes. It's going to be the people who, you know, are actually law-abiding citizens. So now you've just handicapped yourself, not to mention if the state already handicapped you in and of itself. So the next level to go in would be having an illegal firearm. I'm even curious what they do with that. At this stage in the game, and shoot, this goes for a lot of places, no offense to law enforcement, but in a lot of ways, you're better off just taking care of yourself. The arrival times for police officers are going up. The response times are going up. Sometimes they won't even show up for like a robbery after the perpetrator's already left. They just tell you to fill some forms online and just be like, hey, you know, if we hear anything, we took your report, but we'll keep you posted. This is going to embolden a lot of people to go ahead and commit crimes if they weren't already doing it already, because right now it doesn't seem like there's a lot of consequences for the actions that they have.
and whether or not it's legal. This is a massive threat to the residents of Orland Park, Cook County, and Illinois. I want to remind voters that several elected officials that will be on the ballot in Orland Park voted for this abomination. Senator Michael Hastings, Senator Emil Jones, and Representative Justin Slaughter all voted to put criminals ahead of the safety of law-abiding citizens and police. In particular, Senator Hastings, who personally told me that this bill, that he had a family, and that this bill was horrible and there was no way he would vote for it. An outright lie that, in my opinion, disqualifies him to hold his office. I will gladly cast my vote for this resolution and demand the repeal of the Orwellian-named Safety Act.
Here's another thing, too. These same exact politicians who will write these things into, to his point, who will write these things into law, I guarantee you they are either strapped up or they can pay for private security. In San Francisco, there's a huge issue right now with the amount of robberies, the amount of people who are being accosted in the streets. The DA of San Francisco has taken an approach of basically being soft on crime. And to his point, yes, there are a lot of contributing factors to why people commit crimes. But that doesn't mean you have to take a soft approach on it, in my opinion. And unfortunately, for someone like him, he could take that type of a stance because he may have enough money to actually be able to take care of himself, have private security, all this stuff. But the average person who can't afford that, even there was a statistic that came out that self-defense courses were going up in San Francisco. So people recognize that there is a need for this, not to mention the fact, like I said before, police officers are fleeing from, precincts. They're retiring. Some of them are just underpaid, understaffed. It's causing a domino effect where things are just going to get worse and worse and worse. And to his point, politicians can sign these kind of laws into place because to a certain extent, does it affect them? Yes, but they have safeguards and things that they can do to protect themselves, whereas everybody else is kind of left hanging.
But it doesn't end here. There is currently a bill in front of the House to remove school resource officers from our schools, which means no resource officer at Sandburg High School. The city of Chicago has already done this. I personally don't want to see the city of Chicago become the standard for how we conduct public safety because they've abandoned their police officers and abandoned their residents and created a war zone full of criminals. There's also a bill to make fentanyl a misdemeanor in this state. And I want to remind you that we have representatives that currently represent us or will represent us potentially in the federal government that voted to not extend the fentanyl ban federally. Fortunately, it passed, but there are people that actually believe that we shouldn't have a ban on fentanyl that currently represent our community. That's just absolutely unacceptable. It's like they won't stop until they destroy our communities and our society.
To the fentanyl thing and even the drug thing, honestly, to the fentanyl thing and even the drug thing, let's be honest. If you looked at Seattle, they have a huge drug problem. San Francisco has a huge drug problem. Just a lot of the drug issues that a lot of these places have had and how they've taken a softer approach on crime. And unfortunately, it hasn't done really well for everyone. And, how people with violent offenses could literally just, get bail and be out. Now, they're getting rid of cashless bail in Illinois. So that's crazy. My advice is, who cares more about your life than you? You can't expect the government to. Clearly, they don't in Illinois. You got to do what you can to protect you and your family at the end of the day. But let me know what you guys think. As always, kinfolk, I love y'all, and I will see y'all in the next one.